Hi, it's Friday, May 17th, and right now I thought I'd show you what's going on with my Marineland Portrait 5-gallon aquarium that I have set up for my betta, Buddy, my betta. Right now, however, Buddy is in the quarantine tank, and I have one of my glow light tetras in here along with a nerite snail to keep the cycle, to keep the beneficial bacteria going, so I won't have to cycle this tank again once Buddy is ready to come back in. And this is an easy way to keep the cycle going and not lose all that beneficial bacteria, because this glow light tetra and the snail do produce ammonia when they poop and when they pee, and that will keep the nitrogen cycle going, and it'll be all still cycled when Buddy's ready to come back in. And so today I did a water change. I did a 20% water change and cleaned some of the algae off of the plants, the brown algae which had started to form. And the water is looking pretty clear right now. Usually when you do a water change, the water is a bit cloudy for a while, but I did the water change probably, I think, around noon, so it's been about 4 hours now, so it looks pretty good right now. I did have 2 glow light tetras in here up to a couple of days ago, but then I found that one of the glow light tetras was kind of harassing the other one and kind of chasing after him and nipping at him, even though they've been together in the 20-gallon hex in the living room for a couple of years now at least, and they've been fine. But maybe this confined space kind of made him a little bit more anxious or aggressive or something. So this guy's doing fine. He's eating and he's healthy, and the snail is doing fine. The snail will be a permanent resident with Buddy once I get Buddy back in here. So everything's looking good right now. Plants don't have algae all over them. And now I will show you Buddy in his quarantine tank. Alright, here's where Buddy has been for the last few weeks. This is a 10-gallon quarantine tank, and it's just a very minimal tank. Bare bottom, sponge filters, a couple of hides for him, and a few plants in there, moss ball and a Indian almond leaf. But it's just where I'm keeping him as I've been medicating him, trying to deal with the growth that's on his top of his head that I discovered on April 27th. And so I discovered these kind of white grayish patches on his head. It wasn't ick, which I've dealt with before, which usually presents itself as little white kind of salt grain size dots all over fins and or body. And he didn't have those dots. It was more just on top of his kind of his forehead area, some grayish white patches, not fuzzy or cottony as fungus usually is, and not like ick. And so I wasn't quite sure what it was. And so what I did, I put him in this quarantine tank. It's 10 gallons. And for the first couple of weeks, I tried 2 different regimens. The first 4 days, I was dosing the water with a few medications that you can use together that try to treat fungal illnesses or parasites or bacterial infections, because I didn't know what, and I still don't know quite what he has on the top of his head. So these medications are safe to use together, and so you're treating the water. One of them, the fungal medicine, turned the water green because it has some sort of dye in it. But I treated him for 4 days with these API medicines, which are basically powders that you put in the water. And you have a certain schedule where you use them. Some of them you use for 24 hours and then you redose. Some of them you don't redose with that medicine until 48 hours. In between, sometimes you do a small water change. And so for the first 4 days I was using that API medicine, and I didn't really see any difference. It didn't spread, but I really didn't see any difference in how it was looking. And so I switched for the second week, a 5-day regimen of some CChem medication called Furan 2 and Canaplex that they often use together. And it's the same thing. They're powders that you put in the water, and you're treating the water with a certain schedule. And those two treat fungal and bacterial infections. And so I thought, well, I'll try this. Again, didn't do much as far as I could tell. So on the 12th of May, I did a major water change, 60% water change, and carbon to clear all the previous medications out of the water. And then I saw some posts, one post with a lady who had a beta with the same kind of looking patches of gray or white on the top of her beta's head. And she suggested, well, what she actually did, unfortunately, was send her beta off to a fish expert who actually had to euthanize in order to find out what this thing was. He had to euthanize the beta to take kind of a sample and figure out, put it under a microscope to figure out exactly what this thing was. It wasn't so much that the fish, her beta, wasn't dying or anything. He was just acting normally, actually, just as mine is. But she was really concerned about what it was, because she breeds betas and sells betas, and didn't want any kind of unknown illness or disease spreading throughout her different beta tanks. And so that's why she felt she needed to sacrifice this one in order to find out exactly what it was. And so this fish expert sent her back the results, and it turns out that it's a parasite, an internal parasite, that was causing this particular beta's patches on his head. And so the best way to treat that kind of a parasite is to not treat the water as you normally do for a lot of these illnesses, but to treat the beta internally. And in that, you need to figure out a way to medicate the food that you're feeding the beta. And so what you do is they use whatever medication you're going to be using, and for this one they suggested a parasitic, medicine for parasites called Metroplex, and you use it with a powder called Focus, which is basically it's a food binder, and so it helps the medication to bind and to soak into whatever food you mix it with. And often these medicines kind of taste yucky, and so they suggest then also soaking the food with the medication and the binder with something called garlic guard, which basically is kind of just liquid garlic, and that's healthy for fish. That garlic is good for them anyway, but it also helps the fish to be willing to eat that food that's been medicated. And so what you do is you just mix up a little of that medicine, the Metroplex, and the food binder and the garlic in a little bit of food. And in this case, they often suggest bloodworms, frozen bloodworms, and or beta pellets, which are really tiny pellets. They're like a millimeter large in diameter pellets, so they're tiny. And you take about a tablespoon of whatever food, and you mix it with one little measure, which is like I think it's like a teaspoon of the Metroplex medication and the focus binder, food binder. And you mix it together, and you just put a little bit of garlic guard in there and mix it together and let it sit for about half an hour at least, and it allows the medication then to bind and to soak into the food. And you can keep this mixture, because you can keep the mixture in the fridge so you can reuse it. Keeps for at least a week, because with a beta you don't really feed them that much, maybe 3 or 4, or I've even fed them maybe up to 5 frozen bloodworms at a feeding, or 3, 4, 5 tiny pellets at a feeding. And I've been feeding Buddy twice a day, and in that way you get the medication directly into their system, and it will attack the internal parasites if that's what the problem was. I don't know, today is the 5th day of me feeding Buddy this medicated food. Behavior wise, physically, the only thing that's wrong with him are those little patches on his head. Hasn't spread to the rest of his body, and it hasn't attacked his fins. There's no fin rot or any behavioral problems. He's swimming fine. He's has a good appetite. He's just acting normally, which is a good sign. I also saw a video last night where there was a person who has betas who was wondering the same thing. Is this kind of patch on his head illness? Or in her case, she was thinking sometimes it could be what they call marbling, which is just color changes that many betas go through. But this is kind of often it goes, betas will change from blue to white or to pink or that kind of thing, where this he has a really dark blue-black head area, and to have these grayish it's not symmetric. Well, I don't know if the marbling is ever symmetrical, but she's thinking that if the beta is acting normally and has no signs of illness, doesn't scratch against anything or seem uncomfortable or swim funny or abnormal eating habits or anything, but he just acts normal. She's thinking that sometimes maybe it could be marbling, just changing of color. She still doesn't know, but that's something I hadn't really thought of. So maybe it's that, I don't know, because none of these medications has really seemed to make any difference in those patches on his head. There's one slight difference in that on his left side of his head, well, there were basically 3 patches when I first noticed it. A little tiny round circle a ways back from his head on his right side, and then a patch above, like above his snout kind of area, and then another small circle kind of just above and behind his left eye. Right now I think I've noticed that the patch above his snout has kind of merged into that spot behind his left eye, so it's all kind of one patch now, and that little patch on his right side further back. But it hasn't spread in area really anywhere else, and I can't tell. I keep looking at him. He swims so quickly that I can't really get a really good extended look at the patches. They don't look as pronounced, but they're definitely still there. Kind of a gray, more grayish now than white. They're not raised. They're not cottony or fuzzy, so it doesn't look like a fungus normally presents. So I have no idea. So what I'm going to do is, for this Metroplex parasite, internal parasite medicine, what they suggest is doing it maybe at the most 21 days. Well, as many days, just do it until you see definite improvement or elimination of whatever the problem is. I have no idea whether the patches are supposed to completely disappear, or if you're supposed to stop if it just looks like it's receding, and I have no idea if indeed this is illness and not maybe just color changing. But I think I'm going to, this is day 5 today of me feeding him this medicated food. I'm going to go for probably at least a week, maybe a week and a half, and kind of see what it looks like, look at his behavior, and just kind of make a judgment call. If nothing really changes, and if he doesn't look like he's sick or anything or acting any differently, I'll probably stop after a couple of weeks with this. Take out the Glow Light Tetra from Buddy's original tank, put the Glow Light back in his normal tank with the others in the living room, and then put Buddy back in his new Marineland portrait tank, 5-gallon, and just kind of watch him and see if maybe it's just gonna be like this. Maybe it will disappear in time, maybe it won't disappear, maybe it will get worse. I have no idea, but health-wise he seems fine. It's just those patches on his head. So we'll see. Anyway, that's where things stand now. Let me do a close-up maybe on Buddy. Let's see. See, there he is in front of the sponge filter. Let's see, he is swimming just great. Yesterday was kind of cool because, you know, I've been feeding him sometimes with my finger, with one pellet on my finger or one bloodworm on my finger, and then I just put it at the surface of the water. Yesterday I just kind of dangled my fingers actually in the water and just kept very still, and he keeps swimming up to my hand. I know he's curious, and yesterday was the first time he actually pecked at my fingernail. You know, he came right up to it, and then he gave my fingernail a little a little peck, which was kind of cute. So I know he's not scared of my hand, or he's becoming more familiar with it, as I do use it often to feed him. So that was kind of cute. But they have a lot more personality than I had ever known. I knew nothing about bettas, but they are so beautiful and they do have a personality. So anyway, I will keep you updated, but this is day 5 of this third different regimen of medicine. So we'll see. Even if these medications aren't what he needed, they definitely aren't hurting him, and they actually could be a good preventative measure, to like a safeguard, you know, for keeping anything from happening to him. Okay, we shall see. I'll keep you updated.